welcome to another episode of the Rainbow Rundown with your host Scott Fullerton. We recap some of the top stories of the week every Monday, right here on the Left of Str8 Radio Show.
Alrighty, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Rainbow Rundown. Every Monday on the Left of Str8 Show here, we try to give you some of the top stories that have caught my attention throughout the week, and we like to share them with you every Monday on our Rainbow Rundown. Today is June 26, 2023. As always, recording it the day before on Sunday, the 24th. Hope you guys have had a great week. We are entering into the last full week of Pride Month. This was the last weekend of Pride Month. Of course, Pride festivals are all sorts of different times throughout the year, but Pride Month is always celebrated in June to commemorate the Stonewall Uprising at the Stonewall Inn in New York City. So we're culminating today, right now, as I speak. New York is having their Pride Parade. They've had a Pride weekend. LA kicked it off back, I think, the weekend of June 3rd. So hope you guys had a fantastic Pride month. It's been a difficult year for us, which we'll talk about a little more here in the rundown, and we've talked about over the last few weeks. But let's jump right into the news, shall we? First thing, we got two anniversaries to celebrate, one for tragic news and one for happy news. So we'll start with the tragic, because 50 years ago, it was June 24th, 1973, 32 people died in what was once the deadliest attack on our LGBTQ community in U.S. history. On this evening, June 24th, 1973, an arsonist torched the entryway into the Upstairs Lounge, a LGBT club in New Orleans. They had a Sunday beer bust every Sunday, relatively busy attended, usually at least 100 patrons in the bar on a Sunday afternoon. And 50 years ago today, an arsonist torched there was stairways that went up into the bar. It was in the second floor. And so they set fire to the stairway that went up to it. The identity of the arsonist has never been confirmed. No one has ever been arrested in connection with it. However, there was a known patron that had been kicked out of the bar earlier in the day. While he was leaving, survivors of the fire recalled him saying something along the lines of threatening to set the place ablaze. Witnesses saw him buy lighter fluid at a nearby Walgreens, and he allegedly flew through the container in front of the stairwell that led to the entrance of the bar and ran. Again, they did question him, but he was never charged. And to this day, we have never had a successful prosecution for this fire that claimed the lives of 32 people at a gay bar in New Orleans. A bartender at the time by the name of Buddy Rasmussen, he was able to shepherd some of the patrons away through the building's secret door they had. The fire was put under control in less than 30 minutes. 29 people died that night, and 3 others died from their injuries in the days after. Actually, about a third of them were military veterans, according to local experts. The fire is still the deadliest in New Orleans history, but as we all know, the Pulse massacre has now become the deadliest attack on LGBTQ people in the U.S. So sadly, 50 years ago today, we had one of the most horrific hate crimes at the time by an I won't say unknown, because we think we know him, but a unprosecuted person set fire to the Upstairs Lounge in New Orleans. So not a great anniversary to celebrate. They did kind of bring, I think the city of New Orleans apologized for it last year during this time. And as I said, a lot of these people are veterans. So I think one of the veterans wasn't even found out until 2015. And they're still trying to exhume that body to get them buried with the family plot. So sad day in our history on June 24th, 1973, but it's something we need to look back on. And of course, since then, we've had things like the Pulse shooting in Florida. So, first story, anniversary, not a happy one, but let's move on to a happier anniversary of sorts, because the day this is airing on June 26th, the U.S. Supreme Court struck down all state bans on same sex marriage, legalizing it in all 50 states. It required states to honor out of state marriage license as well in the case of Obergefell versus Hodges. So 8 years ago, today that this is airing on the 26th, marriage equality became the law of the land. And I'm going to talk about it. I'm pretty excited. I had one of the plaintiffs from there that's going to be on my show next week. I'll talk about it in a second. But what happened in June 2013, the Supreme Court of the United States struck down DOMA, or Defense of Marriage Act, for violating the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution in the landmark civil rights case of United States versus Windsor. This is Edie Windsor was part of this. She's the one that helped knock down this DOMA. And if you haven't studied on Edie Windsor, you really need to. Her and her girlfriend or wife's story is an incredible story. But that ruling led to the federal recognition of same-sex marriages with federal benefits for married couples connected to either the state of residence in the state of which the marriage was solemnized. But then in 2015, on June 26th, the Supreme Court ruled in Obergefell versus Hodges that the fundamental right of same-sex couples to marry on the same terms and conditions as opposite-sex couples, with all the accompanying rights and responsibilities, is guaranteed by both the Due Process Clause and the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. So on December 13th, 2022, DOMA, or Defense of Marriage Act, was repealed and replaced by the Respect for Marriage Act. So that was just 6 months ago. We took care of the totally disbanded Defense of Marriage Act and replaced it with the Respect for Marriage Act. And that now recognizes and protects same-sex interracial marriages under federal law and interstate relations. The reason we had to do this is we talked about all these states doing laws trying to repeal same-sex marriage. This federally protects those under the law. So very important day in history here. And one of the reasons I'm bringing it up is because I started my show 8 years ago, the week after marriage equality became equal in the law of the land. And one of my very first guests was one of the plaintiffs. People equate marriage equality with Obergefell versus Hodges, but there was actually a bunch of cases for which this happened. The Supreme Court case of Obergefell versus Hodges is not the culmination of one lawsuit, but there was seven, or actually it's seven, because it was ultimated in the consolidation of 6 lower court cases, originally representing 16 same-sex couples, 7 of their children, a widower, an adoption agency, and a funeral director. Those cases came from Michigan, Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. All 6 federal court rulings found for the same-sex couples and other claimants. So in my case, here in Ohio, the case was Henry versus Winslow. It was the second case from Ohio. It involved 4 couples, a child, and an adoption agency. And it was 2011. Kelly Noe and Kelly McCracken married in Massachusetts. They were expecting a child. On February 10th, 2014, them and 3 other legally married couples filed a lawsuit of this Henry versus Winslow, also in the United States District Court for the Southern District of Ohio, to force the state to list both parents on the children's birth certificate. The adoption agency and adoption stars sued to be added to the inadequate services of Ohio law, and it forced it to provide same-sex parents adopting in the state. So Kelly McCracken, one of those defendants, was my very first guest on the Left of Str8 Show 8 years ago, July 2nd, 2015. And I'm excited to say she is going to be one of my special guests returning on my 8-year anniversary show this coming Monday, July 3rd, 2015, 8 years and a day later. So we will not have a Rainbow Rundown that day. Instead, we are going to do our 8-year anniversary show with one of my original guests and one of the original plaintiffs in the marriage equality cases, Kelly McCracken. I'm very excited about that. So there we go. 2 days in history that we need to mention. Let's move on to the rest of the news, shall we? All right, I found this very disturbing. There was a new Gallup poll that came out, and we've been talking about rights being taken away and all these LGBTQ rights bills across the country, trying to take away Drag Queen Story Hour, trying to take away trans rights. And the Republicans have been hammering on this. Ron DeSantis has been hammering on it in Florida for quote unquote woke values. And unfortunately, it seems to be working in some respects. A new Gallup poll has come out with views on same-sex relationships, and it shows that they are currently declining. In 2023, 41% of Republicans say morally acceptable for same-sex relationships. Only 41% of Republicans are saying that same-sex relationships are morally acceptable versus 56% of Republicans in 2022. So that is a huge 15-point difference in 1 year. It's the lowest since the Republicans have been polled in 2014. And equally disturbing, 79% of Democrats say same-sex relationships are morally acceptable, but it was 85% last year in 2022. So a 6-point drop in Democrats saying that same-sex relationships are morally acceptable. 73% of independents say it's morally acceptable, which is actually a very small uptick from 2022. But overall, if you combine all the demographics, 64% this year believe that same-sex relationships are morally acceptable compared to 71% just a year ago today, which happened to be a record high. So we've dropped 6 points in a year. So the messaging that Republicans are getting out is working, and we have to find a way to combat this in the next couple of years. I mean, it's still the highest it's ever been at 64%. When they started doing polling back in early 2000, it was only 38% in 2002 thought same-sex relationships were morally acceptable. 10 years later in 2012, 54% thought it was acceptable. So now 10 years later, 10 plus 1 year later, it's up to 64%. But it's still down from our peak. So it's something we have to pay attention to. The messaging is working, and I'm not at all happy with the way this is going. So we have to be vigilant of it. I mean, it's very important. Republicans are very good about drilling down a message. They have one person say it and repeat it over and over and over again. And if we're going to keep our rights intact, and if we're going to keep the public on our side, which they still overall are, we are going to have to be ever vigilant and really get our own message out there. So that was a very disconcerting polling fact from Gallup. Next story I want to talk about, which kind of goes in tune with this, but is on a little happier note. Ron DeSantis, the current governor of Florida, has had a very bad week on his war on woke. A federal judge in Orlando this past Friday temporarily blocked a Florida law widely seen as an attack on drag. It's the second major loss in court for Ron DeSantis this week, coming days after another judge struck down the state's ban on Medicaid coverage of gender-affirming care. So what happened was U.S. District Judge Gregory Presnell ruled against the drag queen ban after owners of the restaurant Hamburger Mary's, which I am a very big fan of, sued the state. The restaurant, which has locations all around Florida and across the country, said the law regarded live entertainment threatened a weekly event featuring drag queens at the restaurant. Fresno issued an injunction barring the state from enforcing the law while the court case proceeds. The legal team that represented the Florida restaurant was the same one that won a ruling against a drag ban in Tennessee earlier this month that I reported on a previous Rainbow Rundown a couple weeks ago. So, yay, Friday they struck down the drag queen ban. They put an injunction on it while the court goes forward. And then, as I said, earlier in the week on Wednesday, U.S. District Judge Court Robert Hinkle struck down the Florida Agency for Healthcare Administration that banned Medicaid coverage for gender-affirming care for both young people and adults. I talked about this on last week's Rainbow Rundown. It came a week after he already issued an injunction allowing minors already in treatment to continue receiving puberty blockers. We talked about that last week. But Presnell said the law conflicts with statutes guaranteeing parental discretion on actions involving their children, reasoning that it's ironic as DeSantis and Florida Republicans pass a slew of anti-LGBTQ laws by citing parents' rights. The judge wrote that any argument of compelling interest didn't apply to the state. Florida law currently says, presently and independently, that any minor is allowed to attend an R-rated film at the theater if accompanied by a parent or guardian. So that's just one of the ways that they're already allowing parents to make a decision for younger kids on what they deem acceptable. So this has been deemed. So two things against Ron DeSantis as far as his woke culture. Also, as much as I don't want to see Trump as the nominee, and I'm hoping he would lose or whoever the Republican nominee is, DeSantis also saw his poll numbers go down 6 points, 6 or 9 points this week as well. So his run for president is going downhill as well. So not a good week for DeSantis is all. Of course, I'm playing the very smallest violin in the world because I really don't care. All these Republicans are in the same boat as far as trying to deny LGBTQ rights. I've been trying to stay as anti-political as possible. This one tends to have a lot of politics in it, this show, but I can't hide my opinions on this. And I think they were important things to bring up in this week's Rainbow Rundown. So let's go on to the next story, shall we? This one I found very disturbing as well. Leaders of a southeastern Wisconsin school district are reviewing a measure that would ban flags and signs that designate and specify certain areas as safe spaces for the LGBTQ students in their buildings. So for those of you that don't know, a lot of schools, colleges even, deem safe spaces where you can put up stickers or flags or something in the classroom to know that LGBTQ people have a reliable person on staff at the school if they need to speak to, if they're being bullied, if they're being harassed, whether at home or at school. So this group in Wisconsin, it's brought, I think they're Arrowhead School District in Wisconsin. They're trying to take away the right to put these stickers and flags up there. An early draft of the policy also banned Black Lives Matter signs, anti-racist signage, rainbows, and all flags other than state and national flags or specifics to a foreign language being taught, and signage of any type promoting sexual orientation or gender preference would be against the rules if this was passed. So very sad state of affairs that you cannot promote safe spaces in schools. And there was a petition brought on by both freshman Chase Eastman and sophomore Kat Cummings that has over 320 signatures as of last week to stop the policy so they can continue to have these stickers and flags up. The board president, Kim Siebert, offered a compromise solution with stickers that make all the students feel welcome and safe, but they want to use the school logo and add positive messages. But looking over to the Starker, they're more just affirmations. They don't really designate it safe for anybody. It's just a positive affirmation with the school logo. So I wasn't really impressed with that looking it over. They debated this at the school board meeting with a small group of representatives. They're going to bring this to the entire school board to be voted on July 12th. So I'm going to be interested to see what happens about it and see if they remove any signage or flags to stop there being safe spaces designated in schools. And this is Wisconsin. And if it goes through, there's also a school district in Oak Creek, which is a Milwaukee suburb, considering a very similar ban to their safe spaces. So very interesting story. I'm going to keep on that one and see what's happening, because I find it very sad indeed that we're trying to eliminate safe spaces for LGBTQ or any marginalized students in our schools. Like I said, it happens in colleges as well. So this is only for elementary school kids and high school, but sad state of affairs. Last story I want to talk about is kind of, I wouldn't call it controversial, but there's two sides of it that I'm not sure exactly where I come on exactly. I'd love to hear your guys' comments and tell me where you're at. But Starbucks, the coffee company, their Workers United, which is their recent union that they formed, confirmed this past Friday on the 23rd that more than 150 stores and 3,500 workers are going to be going on strike over the course of the next week. And they're saying it's due to the company's treatment of queer and trans workers. It clarified on Twitter that the Strike with Pride action is on unfair labor practices. It's talking about refusal to bargain over changes in pride decorations and policies, as well as addition to a union busting campaign, and also that they are fighting for consistent hours, health, and safety amid protection from discrimination and other workers' rights. So it's a very interesting story, because Starbucks has been pretty inclusive from what I have read and heard about in quite a few years. They were very aggressive against stopping this union forming, which is not progressive at all. But I understand it from a company standpoint, even though I don't agree with it. But as far as benefits and their treatment towards the LGBTQ community, I always thought it's pretty much in line. They did have a little bit of a controversy back in 2022, where supposedly they said that they were going to take away trans partners' benefits for unionizing. It was brought up by a couple of the workers in Oklahoma and right down the street from me in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that supposedly managers and other people had talked about if they unionize back in 2022, that it could lead to trans policies being out of their contract, which I just find unusual. Starbucks health insurance has covered gender-affirming surgery since 2012. Since 2018, they announced that they were back last year after all the big controversy on Roe versus Wade happened. They announced that they would cover travel costs for staff seeking abortions and gender-affirming care and legislative attacks here against healthcare in the U.S. So I'm really not sure what this is coming from. It's like I said, it's been a huge fight between this union and Starbucks. It's being led this boycott next week, or the strike next week, is being led by the Seattle Roastery. They're leading the charge, and they've got several other coffee shops following. I think there's one in Nebraska. I think there's 4 more stores in Illinois also taking strike action. So I'm going to be watching this closely and seeing what's happening. Like I said, I am pro-union 100%. I understand why some businesses are against unions, but those are usually ones that don't offer good benefits. So I've seen some businesses that offer great benefits that have had strike votes put up, unionizing votes put up. So I'm going to be watching this closely. The strike is supposed to happen next week. Like I said, it started out saying it was over Pride merchandise being taken down early, not supporting Pride Month. It went on to say that they're going through consistent hours, healthcare and safety and discrimination, among other things. So, very interesting story that I'll be following up on. Of course, I'm a Dunkin' Donuts man, so I got that going. But it'll be interesting to see what happens with this. So that was the last big story that I'm going to cover on this Rainbow Rundown. So let's go over some of the headlines that I saw this week in entertainment. First off, Out Magazine, after not doing it for a couple of years, has come back this year with their 2023 Most Eligible Bachelor list, along with the Most Eligible Bachelorette list. As far as bachelors, they have a great and diverse group of people: Zane Phillips, Lil Nas X, Dan Levy, Johnny Sabili, Rafael Silva, Bowen Yang, Ian McKellen. There was a couple of trans men included. It was a good diverse list of most eligible bachelors. There was also one for our lady friends out there, so you can look that up on Out Magazine. I did see, I was sent last week, the trailer for Ethan Cohen's new lesbian comedy called Drive Away Dolls, a new movie that's going to be coming out, I think, in September. If you haven't seen the trailer yet, you might want to look it up on YouTube. I think it's going to be a pretty good shot. I got to see some publicity stills from it sent to me by one of my publicity friends. It kind of opened wide the publicity for it starting this past weekend. Want to give a big shout out to a friend of the show, Jay Rodriguez from Queer Eye of the Straight Guy, the original OG. He turned 40 years old this week and had some great posts on his social media. So congratulations and happy birthday to Jay Rodriguez. We had a fantastic interview with him last year, 2 years ago. It was also announced this week that Tim Federle, his High School Musical, the musical that he created for Disney Channel, announced that they're going to be doing a final season this year. Of course, it's one of the stars is Joshua Bassett, who came out famously a while back. Tim Federle I've been a huge fan of from his book, Better Nate Than Never. He also did some great books on cocktails that I loved. So Tim announced that High School Musical, the musical, will be ending after 5 seasons coming up. Great LGBT community ally Lizzo donated $50,000 to the Marsha P. Johnson Institute. It's a Black and trans nonprofit. If you don't know who Marsha P. Johnson is, learn your history, folks. She was one of the pioneers of the Stonewall Uprising. So be sure to look into that, and good on Lizzo for that. Of course, we talked about a couple weeks ago on the Rainbow Rundown all of the blowback for a gay character on Strange Worlds, an animated picture. Now, one of the newest animated pictures out called Elemental has bigots targeting the actor for playing a non-binary role. Avakai Hauser voices a non-binary water element, Lake Ripple, getting a lot of blowback. So if you can, go to their social media and support them. So that's kind of the news and entertainment. I did see yesterday the movie No Hard Feelings with Andrew Barth Feldman and Jennifer Lawrence. It's a great, Andrew Barth Feldman is a huge ally to the community, and Jennifer Lawrence has been a great ally as well. The film also stars Matthew Broderick and Laura Benante, two of my Broadway favorites, as plays Andrew's parents in the show. So if you're looking for a good movie that kind of a little raunchier, a good throwback to the 90s rom-coms that had a little hard edge to them, it's called No Hard Feelings, and you definitely want to go out and see that now. That's it. That's all the stories I'm going to go over this week. Like I said, next week we will not be having a Rainbow Rundown because we'll be doing the special 8-year anniversary of the Left of Str8 Show. So excited to have back my original guests, Ben Patrick Johnson and Kelly McCracken, on the show. So look for that. We're going to be giving away 8 gift bags to our lucky listeners that tune in. It'll be a 2-week contest where you can win 8 gift bags. I've had some great things where we got DVDs for Marriage of Inconvenience. Our good friend Del Shores has given me a lot of Sorted Lives memorabilia. We have some candles. We have some all sorts of fun things for the grab bag for 8 lucky listeners. We'll be promoting a whole bunch of new things coming on the Left of Str8 Show. And that is 1 week from the day this airs on July 3rd. So we'll be out of Pride Month, but we have a lot of stuff happening for the Left of Str8 Show. I'm excited to announce. And that's it. Thanks so much for tuning in for another Rainbow Rundown right here in the Left of Str8 Show. If you have any news, please go ahead and send it to us through social media, or you can go to the website, www.leftofstraightradio.com. Left of Straight is always spelled LEFTOFSTR and the number 8. So www.leftofstraightradio.com. Check that out, and you can always get in contact with me. So have a great week, everybody. Pride Month is over, but lots of stuff still happening in our LGBTQ community. Appreciate you listening in. We'll see you next week. If it's Monday, time for Rainbow Rundown. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Left of Str8 Show. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast distributor, and please give us a 5-star rating so more listeners can find us. You can follow us on social media, and be sure to check out our website, www.leftofstraightradio.com, for contests and other news and information. See you next week.